Hello, everyone. This is Julie Hoag with Vegetarians and Meat Lovers Split Table Recipes podcast. And I'm really excited that I have a guest today that does something really amazing. So I'm really excited to learn more about what she does. Her name is Tiffany Sage Swan, and she is a retreat chef. I mean, that just sounds awesome because people love retreats, people like travel, and then to be able to cook for those people. How fun. Well, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So, what exactly do you do as a retreat chef?
Well, I am combining my 25 plus years of experience in restaurants and the food industry in my love for wellness and like sisterhood in a career. So
Mm.
I travel around the country. Maybe someday I'll get to travel around the world as well.
Yeah.
But I go to women's and wellness events and I nourish the attendees as well as the host so that the host can
Oh.
really be in their zone of genius. They can do what they do best, whether that's yoga or leadership training or whatever. And so the attendees can also like really be in the growth and the expansion of the retreat and really just be held by all of it. And no one has to have a grumbly stomach or worry about running to the store or anything. I take care of all of that. And it is really, truly my honor to be a part of each of these communities as these generally women, but sometimes gentlemen as well, come together in a house and come as strangers and leave as good friends, and to be able to be a catalyst to some of that conversation that happens around the table, passing platters and clinking glasses and, sharing over ex their excitements of the retreat and moving forward. So really, I selfishly get to do all the things I love, hang out with amazing women and nourish them at the same time.
That's extraordinarily amazing. And I didn't even know this was a career. So this is really cool. And so do you just travel like just around the country? So you just go and live somewhere for a while during the retreat, or is it kind of like a contract?
Yeah, great question. I generally am traveling almost as a retreat attendee. So I
Mm.
will stay in the house with the attendees. I'll, get up in the morning and have their breakfast ready. So they're waking up to the smell of bacon and things like that, or the smell of coffee, whichever drives you out of bed. And
Yes.
I stay there throughout the day, cooking breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. And then I go to bed in the same home that they are. So it's generally a contract for that retreat, but I work with a number of retreat hosts and people who are, I guess, wanting to lead something in a community setting. So I become part of that community. And one of my favorite parts about retreats is, well, I mean, there's so many parts, but one of
Yes.
my favorite parts as a chef is to do all the research in advance of where the farmers markets are and the co-ops and
Yeah.
where to buy the freshest meat or seafood or cheese or whatever it may be that that area is known for. So, by way
Ah.
of example, I was not long ago in Vermont. So, I had a lot of Vermont cheeses and a lot of fall flavors, apples and maple syrup. And then I went to Cape Cod and I picked up a bunch of seafood that was
Ah.
incredible and, working with the local markets. So, that's one of my most favorite things about going to these other locations. So, I mean, it was a long-winded answer to your question,
That's really
but
cool, though. I mean, talk about variety for you and to try these different things that are regional. I mean, that's really fun.
it really is. It really is. And really trying to, um, I guess, kind of encompass the retreat location itself and what it's known for,
Mm.
but also what the retreat is about. If it's a little bit more nutrition based, I can provide
Mm.
that nutrition um, baseline for all the meals. Um, I love to make sure that vegetarians and the meat lovers in
I was
all the
gonna ask
groups.
that. Yeah.
That they are all taken care of, that they're not all feeling like, oh, we need to eat vegetarian because there's two vegetarians in the group. Or,
Right.
I try to make sure that everyone feels seen and held by what nourishes them best. And so much so that when I have vegetarians and vegans, I often ask them if they don't mind being around meat, because
Oh,
sometimes they
sure.
do.
Right,
And,
right.
I want to make sure that everyone's comfortable.
Mhm. That's true. Some people are extraordinarily sensitive to that. I am not because I cook meat for my family, so I've probably am a little bit more lenient than some people might be, but that's because I'm also feeding meat lovers. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. It can be a challenge though sometimes. I mean, do you find it to be a challenge or is it not so bad for you?
I love a challenge. So, yes, it can be challenging. It can be very difficult to do something that is maybe on a theme. So, by way of example, the
Mm,
Vermont retreat, we had a mac and cheese bar, and
okay.
I had some vegans there. And it's very hard
Mm,
to do a very good Vermont cheddar mac and cheese with non-dairy cheese.
I bet.
I did a lot of research. I figured out some things. I made it great, but that, Vermont cheddar is just something you can't
Yeah.
replace. So, but I had both. I had a big
Sure.
big bowl of the Cabot cheddar, and I had a big bowl of the non-dairy cheddar.
Do you find it harder to cook with the non-dairy cheddar?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Not
do
all of
too.
the
Mm,
non-dairy cheeses melt nicely.
right.
So it really depends on what it is that you're working with. And that's where my food science background comes in. And I can
Oh,
help to like
sure.
emulsify it a bit. And I will
Mm,
share that one of my favorite little tricks for making like a cheese sauce is to
mhm.
use cauliflower, because it has that
Oh,
creaminess and it
yeah,
kind of mimics cheese. And then you can add that
sure.
cheesy flavor from the
Mhm.
non-dairy cheese or nutritional yeast or things like that.
Do you really have to grind up the cauliflower then? I would imagine.
Yes, I cook it and
Yeah,
then puree it so it's
sure.
smooth and like the cheese.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense to me. And then it's also adding some health to that. So that's
Exactly.
fantastic.
Exactly.
My boys always hate cauliflower, but sometimes I sneak it in things and they won't realize it. And then, that's great.
It's a good way to hide it, definitely.
It is. So tell us some about your background. You mentioned a little bit about it in I've seen on Instagram anyway, where you have been many different places in your career.
I have indeed. As I mentioned, I have a food science background. I have a food science and nutrition background, as well as a culinary background. And I have worked in food product development and in restaurants for the better part of 3 decades, really, which the math doesn't work out because I feel like I'm only 30.
You're
So,
right. I get it.
but I have always loved food. I've worked in many different facets of food, and currently I am a retreat chef, which, going back a few steps, I was a executive chef at a major ski resort in the Lake Tahoe area.
Oh, nice.
And I was the chef de cuisine at the Ritz-Carlton here in Lake Tahoe. And I've worked in a number of restaurants throughout the West, as well as doing food product development, sometimes at the same time. Um,
Mm,
and I've kind of been all over. I've also worked in wine. I love wine
mm,
partly because of the craft and the heart that goes into winemaking, especially in
right.
more boutique winemaking settings. So I've worked in Oregon and Washington and New Zealand in wine cellars. And
Oh, wow.
really, my career is all about food is love and
Yeah.
able to serve that food as love.
That is very awesome. I love that. I love your outlook and how you've come to where you are. I mean, just that's an amazing conglomeration. I can't say that word, conglomeration. That's what I'm looking for. Of all things to make you be able to do this. Because now you're obviously very independent and you're creating what I think is really cool about your job now is that you're you're creating new things all the time, although you're still drawing from your experience and perhaps old recipes, but you're going to a new location and completely
Hmm.
reinventing recipes based on your area. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, in a way. And it's a really fun way to combine all of that experience and still have that creativity and provide what I know best to those that are out in the world.
Right. So, what are some of your favorite things to cook?
Oh my gosh, I'm always asked this question and I never have a good answer. I should come up with an answer because I do get asked this often. Um, but really, I am a very seasonal and mood-based cook.
Mm.
So, for example, in Lake Tahoe, where I am right now, it snowed last night. If I had
Oh,
on the
already.
menu, it's winter's here. That's why I'm sitting here in my puffy. I'm all cold.
Right.
But if I had something planned for tonight that was like a salad or something, I'd probably end up changing that to a chili because that's what feels
Yeah,
appropriate for the weather. So
sure.
I really like to go based on what I'm feeling, what the people around me are feeling, and what the season is telling me too.
That's very
But
cool. And
that
then you
being
have that.
said, anything can be a taco with a tortilla and a dream.
Excuse me. Exactly. But then you have to make sure you have that stuff on hand. Do you have to get your stuff like ahead of time or do you ever find yourself like running out in between meals to get things?
Definitely. I run out to stores and retreats regularly, partly because you never know what people are going to enjoy. You know, if
True.
I get a quart of blueberries and everyone's a blueberry lover, I might be through that in a day when I think it's going to last 3 days. So, you know,
Hmm.
I I try to kind of make my own assessments based on some nutritional and dietary preferences questionnaires that I send out, but you never know. So I always run out to stores, and then it also gives me the opportunity to maybe get something that someone's craving. You know, if
Hmm.
say one of the attendees is like, I could really use some green tea in the morning. And so I'll
Mm.
go pick that up or um, you know, again to the chili example, maybe I'm making chili and someone says, I normally eat corn chips with my chili instead of cornbread. I'll
Yeah.
run out and get some corn chips.
Sure. Oh, yes. That's fun. That's fun that you can make those last minute changes too, and that you have leeway in the
Definitely,
schedule. Hmm. That just sounds very fun.
definitely. Yes. It really
so you
is. It
have,
really is.
so you do have quite a bit of interaction with the people at the retreat. Sounds like.
I do. I do. And that's
Mhm.
part of what I love. Years of being the chef behind the curtain, so to speak, or
Right.
behind the swinging door, as it may be. It's
Yes.
nice to get to know the people that I'm nourishing and not just giving them a plate and never seeing them, never, knowing if it hit the right buttons or not.
Right. It's so much more interactive. Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, do you make enough so that you get to eat it too?
I try to. I I was joking at the one of the last retreats I was at that I often don't like to eat what I'm making. There's,
Mm.
I'm tasting it, I'm smelling it. So
Oh.
often I'll have the leftovers. So say I'm making lasagna for dinner tonight. I'll probably have that for lunch tomorrow.
Mm,
And
mhm,
while everyone else is having something else for lunch, and then I'll have that lunch for dinner that day. And
mhm.
I'm always like one meal behind.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that's a bad thing. Yeah. And then you know you're going to have enough. You don't want to like eat it and then someone else doesn't get food at the retreat, right?
100%. Yeah.
That'd be a problem.
Exactly. It's like, oops.
I know. Got to eat what's left over, not.
Exactly.
So, do you like to cook desserts as well?
I do. Yeah. I started in baking as I think a lot of young cooks do.
Hmm.
And as a food scientist, one of my specialties is in cookies.
Okay.
So I love to just kind of whip out cookies based on what people are craving. But yes, I do enjoy baking. I'm not a pastry chef.
Hmm.
I know some incredible pastry chefs that make beautiful, beautiful wedding cakes and
Right.
entrements and things that I cannot come close to making, but
Right.
I can make you some sourdough or a cupcake.
Nice. And then do you generally probably do have dessert available at the retreats, I would
I
imagine,
do.
because it's kind of a thing that people like to indulge in, especially on a retreat, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I will say most of the retreats that I do are a little bit geared towards wellness. So,
Okay. Hmm.
I tend to like to cook a little bit more the whole foods, seasonal, um,
Yep.
as organic as possible.
Hmm.
That being said, dark chocolate fits in everywhere. And
Yeah.
there's often an opportunity for some kind of delicious dessert that fits into those kind of well-being categories.
Oh, for sure. Especially, yeah, dark chocolate does that's perfect sentence. It fits everywhere. I love dark chocolate. My kids don't. They're all like, "No, no, no, mom, we need the milk chocolate." And I'm like, "Okay,
More
milk
for
chocolate's
you.
okay, but dark chocolate. I mean, come on."
More for you that way.
Exactly. So, then in talking about wine, do you select the wines for the retreat too, or is that somebody else's
Sometimes.
job? Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I do. It depends on what they're looking for.
Hmm.
Uh, one of the retreats I did recently, we brought in some local wines and we did a little wine tasting experiment together where
Fun.
I walked them through wine tasting and then did some pairing with some different foods and see how those things compare and contrast. I do pick wines, but in general, when people are at retreats, they're not looking for like paired wines to their meals. They're just looking for something to pour and sit back and relax.
Mm-hmm. Right, for sure. Now, what are some of your favorite foods to, if you were to pick a food group, what's one of your favorite food groups to create meals from? Like, do you really like to focus on the protein or the fruits, the vegetables?
That's a really good question. I'd say I often base on vegetables,
Mm,
but figure out how to get protein in there
mhm,
because uh, protein's good for all of us. And I think we're deficient in protein in general, especially for aging women like myself. We need even
mhm,
more protein to just maintain that
mm.
muscle. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be an animal protein, but I
Right.
do, kind of do the vegetable and protein simultaneously. And then I
Mm-hmm.
fill in the rest.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So that's how you approach it. Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to ask. That's very interesting because it's true. I think you do kind of focus on one particular thing. A lot of people focus on the meat, right? Like that's
Mhm.
the meat entree. What's the entree going to be? But I always say, if someone doesn't eat meat, people always ask, all my life, people have asked me, how are you going to get enough food? And I'm like, well, nobody picks on someone who doesn't eat the broccoli or the
Right.
salad. But if you don't eat the meat, everyone's just like, all up in arms. Like
Yeah,
there's so many proteins out there. So it's silly that people say that, but we're a society that's really focused on that meat entree. I think it's changing a little
definitely.
bit though. Like from years ago, I feel like it was more meat focused, and now we're just getting so many more plant-based options out there.
I agree. It's really kind of enjoyable to
Hmm.
see how much it's been growing in
Hmm.
terms of vegetables kind of taking the center plate and not being,
Yeah.
just about the meat, like you said.
And we all know that's healthier for us. That's staves off cancer, all these things. So it really
Yeah,
should be a focus, you know?
definitely. Definitely.
Now, tell me one of your favorite recipes, and do you have a secret about how you make it?
Oh, favorite recipe. I don't know. Um,
It's hard to decide. Or just pick
it,
one that you kind of like. It doesn't have to be any kind of favorite. It's too hard to pick a favorite sometimes, I think.
there's one recipe that I come back to over and over and over, and
Mm,
it's especially this time of year. And it is one in which started as my mom's recipe, and my mom's not the
Mm.
cook in our family.
Okay.
And so she is blown away and honored that I continually make her recipe. Of course, I've made my tweaks to it and I've, made
Mhm.
it my own, but it's essentially a white chicken chili. And
Oh, okay.
it's something that's so easy to make um, vegetarian or vegan, or put a lot of chicken in it for a meat lover, or even keep it separate and kind of combine.
Mm.
Again, because I love vegetables, I always add a whole bunch of vegetables, whether it's some braised kale or sauteed zucchini
Mm.
or something like that, to add a little bit of vibrancy and fiber to
Right.
my soup. And um, yeah, it's one that I go to over and over and over. It's really a good one. In fact, I think that's kind of why I became a cook, because she wasn't as much.
Oh.
She's a great cook. She just doesn't love it.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
so this recipe was one of hers, and uh, she made it for me when I was staying at her house a couple of years ago, and I have since totally revamped it and made it my own, but it's still based on my mom's recipe. So it's a white
Mm.
chicken chili. It's filled with fennel and aniseed and other
Mm.
aromatics that make it really delicious.
Mhm.
Nice amount of spice. And it's a great one to make either vegetarian or vegan, or make, full of chicken.
Mhm.
I love vegetables, so I like to put in some maybe sauteed zucchini or some frozen spinach, um, braised kale, just to add a little bit of that extra nutritional value and
Mhm.
fiber and pop of color. And I just come to it over and over and over. It's such a favorite.
Nice.
And this is a little plug. That recipe is in my cookbook that is coming out sometime in the future. I don't know yet, but stay tuned.
Very cool. Yes. That sounds awesome. So when you call it a white chili, is it because the beans are white or what really makes it white?
Great question. It is because the beans are white and
Mm.
there's no addition of tomatoes. So it's essentially, your garlic, onions. I put some hatch chilies from the can in there, and
Mm.
then dump in the white beans, including the starches, so that that
Okay.
can help thicken and also create a little bit of that creamy base.
Okay.
And then I add the aromatics in there. That goes in early with the garlic and onion. Like
Mm.
I mentioned, fennel seed and aniseed. I put in some coriander, some red pepper flakes. Um, and then those beans go in there with their starches.
Mhm.
And at that point, you can add some chicken if you wanted. You could add
Mm.
some vegetable broth if you wanted to thin it out. I often stir in a little bit of sour cream, sometimes non-dairy
Okay.
sour cream if I'm
Uh-huh.
doing a non-dairy. It adds that little bit of tang and richness. And
Mhm.
then I love cilantro. I'm not a person that it tastes like soap. So I stir in a healthy amount of cilantro at the end.
Nice. And you do that at the end. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. I know it's so interesting that some people, I've heard the same thing. People think it tastes like soap. And I'm like, I don't understand how, I mean, I would never describe it as soap.
I think it's a genetic thing, that
It
like your
might
taste
be.
buds get something different
Mm.
than theirs do.
It's so weird. We have always had guinea pigs. So we have a guinea pig. And so we always have cilantro at the house because she loves to eat it. She loves to eat the,
Ah,
the herbs. So I almost always have parsley and cilantro in my house because she loves the herbs. So it's like one of those staples I buy every time I go, which is
I
so
love
funny.
that. It's a well-seasoned guinea pig.
Yes. Exactly. The things we buy, it's funny
Yeah.
that pets can determine what you're going to buy, which does happen.
Right.
So, do you have any other secrets or things you'd like to share? Because I always like to pick a brain of someone like you who's been doing this so extensively for so long. It's just awesome that you probably have a huge amount of knowledge.
Oh my gosh. Probably more than I could share in the time we have together.
Right.
But I would say, especially for your audience, vegetarians and meat lovers together, one of the things that's going to help your vegetarian items taste more like a meat lover's item
Mm,
is something that's going to bring some umami to it. So maybe that's adding, if you're not vegan, maybe it's adding some Parmesan cheese or
mm,
some soy sauce or Worcestershire sauce. If
mm-hmm.
you are vegan, maybe it's adding some mushroom powder or
Mm.
cocoa powder is a great source of
Oh,
umami. That's my secret ingredient for a regular red chili when it's vegetarian. That
huh.
cocoa powder really boosts that richness. And
Interesting.
again, richness is something that's often lacking in vegetarian food that we are
Right.
used to in meat lovers food. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, if you're not vegan, butter stirred into something in the end or cream, sour cream, things like that can really amp up that kind of fatty richness that's not
Mm,
only satiating and makes you feel extra full and satisfied, but it also is going to like kind of satisfy your mouth too, because we've we all know about the sweet, salt, sour, bitter, right? And
right.
we've heard about umami. Fat is the next one that they're determining that our taste buds can
Oh,
actually detect fat. And
okay.
when you're eating something that has that fat in it, it's going to provide a little bit more of a roundness in the flavor
Mm,
and the complexity. And
mm-hmm.
complex food is more interesting in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to be complex in terms of number of ingredients, but if you're hitting all those things, the sweet, salt, sour, bitter, umami, fat, if you have
Mm-hmm.
all of that in something, you're going to have a flavor bomb and it's going to be amazing. So a great example of that is maybe tempura veggies. We've got that umami from the veggies. We've got the fat from frying. And then maybe
Mm-hmm.
we dip it in a sauce that's vinegar and honey and soy sauce. And, you get all those, the bitter and the sweet and the salt and the sour all in one bite. And you're like, this is amazing. And that can
Yeah.
help convert some meat lovers.
Right. I think that's so true because, like, when I think about tasting like a salad dressing or something that's low fat or no fat, you can tell. So I
Yes.
believe that our tongues can tell it because sometimes I just flat out don't like them. Like they're
Yeah.
just. So that's really interesting that they're finding that information out because I believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it definitely helps to satisfy us more too.
Mm, right.
That low fat or no fat salad dressing or cheesecake or ice cream is like, why even bother?
Right.
But if you have a small bite of a really good cheesecake or ice cream or full fat dressing, I mean, how much dressing are you really using? That a
Yeah.
little bit of olive oil is going to hurt,
Right.
So
Right.
I think it's just so much more satisfying and you don't need as much.
Yeah, because I find too, just as a vegetarian, there's some meals where I'm like full for longer. And I think that's a part of it too. If you try to eat something too lean, you're not going to be full as long and you're just not going to be as satisfied. You're really going to be going back for something else.
Yes,
And
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
that's very interesting. Well, this has been so amazing. So, where can people find information about you?
Oh gosh, I am one of those weird people that doesn't really do social media. But I do have an Instagram that is kind of my storefront, if you will. I just don't always update the merchandise. So I do check it regularly though. So if you send me a message or just want to say hello, my Instagram is Tiffany Sage Swan, my full name. That's also my website name.
Mm,
So
mhm.
you can visit my website or you can drop me an email. Same thing, hello at Tiffany Sage Swan. So make it super easy for you.
That is awesome. So where are you right now? Can you share that with us?
I am
Or is it
in
a
Lake
secret?
Tahoe right
Okay.
now. I'm in Lake Tahoe right now, which is my home.
Okay.
I don't have any retreats coming up for the rest of this year. But I do have openings in 2024. Currently, I'm slated to go to places like Sedona and
Mm,
Montana and the Gulf Shores of Alabama. So
fun.
some fun places, but I'd love to go some more fun places and help nourish additional retreats.
Absolutely. Do you get to do any sightseeing when you're in these places, or do you
I
build on some time to do that?
I do. When I arrive for a retreat, I often arrive 2 days early so that I can do the
Mm.
shopping and that sort of
Oh,
thing. But that also allows a little time for taking myself out to dinner or doing a little sightseeing, maybe going for a trail run in one of the area trails, that sort of thing.
yeah. Oh, that's very fun. Very cool. Well, very awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming to chat with me. This has been really fun. I've really enjoyed learning about what you do, and it's a very unique thing that is very enjoyable, obviously, for people and for you. So, thank
Yeah.
you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to more.
Yes. All right. You have an amazing day. Bye bye.
Bye bye.